So we want to distinguish. We want to come to the point where we can tell the difference between what's functional and what's not functional. Right? What's benefiting us and what's not benefiting us. What's furthering our desire to become trained in our mindfulness, training our mindfulness, creating that powerful tool, and what's not. So the context matters. How we're defining what's functional and what's dysfunctional. In this context, if we are concentrating, so for instance, because the body scan produced tensions in some people, that might have been dysfunctional in one context. In another context, that becomes functional. So it's helpful to remind ourselves what the context is so that we have a guide to, is this what we want or not want? So if we're going into meditating on the thoughts and we're going to be looking with introspection at which thoughts we want to keep and which thoughts we want to say are dysfunctional and say, no, we're not going to engage in you right now. That introspection has judgment in it, doesn't it? It has some ability to discern what it is and then judge whether or not it's in line with the goal that we have. So we are looking at something that is compatible with conceptual thought. We're not saying all thoughts are bad. We're saying let's label these thoughts and figure out if they are interfering. If they are compulsory, if they're involuntary, that involuntariness is what we're avoiding. We're looking to be voluntary. I am voluntarily choosing this object. I'm voluntarily placing my mind on it. And in order to kind of separate out what should remain and what should be discarded, I need to use introspection to identify thinking and label it, right? We want to be accurate and non-judgmental or neutral in tone, so we don't have this attitude that arises that's negative and sort of judgmental towards ourselves. Like you were very kind at the end, saying, no judgment about yourself, right? Well, that's the perfect attitude to have towards yourself during meditation. You know, here's what's arising. Okay, so then if I'm going to really deal with this the best, if I get into the judgmental attitude, then I'm into a whole story about myself. And it's taking me away from the process of actually training my mind. So it's not very effective. It becomes an involuntary thing when it's a habit, and it's like I'm judgmental about myself all the time, I'm self-critical or whatever. Then that habit takes up so much energy. Right? It takes up so much more energy than is needed to focus the mind on the training that's involved, that we're looking. But so we want to look at our thoughts and use some labels. So let's just think about these labels and try them on. If they feel judgmental, then don't use them, right? But if they're like reminders, oh, this is something that I'm not wanting right now, just by labeling it a daydream. Oh, daydreams are fun, right? And they're enticing, they're attractive. I think I've spent most of many years of my meditating have had some element of daydream involved, right? Just off, oh, I'm just going to let myself go into this. They're not all pleasant daydreams. So, anyway, am I remembering something in the past? Especially if I'm doing sensory meditation on the breath or something else, If I'm remembering something in the past, I'm definitely outside of that. Conceptually, if it's a whole story that's distracting, you might be remembering a quote that has to do with it. So remembering it depends on the context. Planning. I love to plan what's going to happen next, how I'm going to go from Rome to Paris, whatever. I'm planning, and there's all kinds of mindfulness that has to go into planning, but that's not what we're doing when we're focusing the mind on an object. Worrying, I'm trying to train my mother now not to worry, because it's really not anybody's benefit. Worrying interferes. It's just added energy that has to be expended, and it doesn't produce anything positive. So worrying is sort of extraneous. It's sort of added on and makes things worse in a way. Judging, and any of those negative emotions like anger or desire or confusion, any of those things, this is separating out our object. We're certain about our object, so there shouldn't be any confusion arising, right? We've already clarified what exactly our object is in general. The confusion that we have as to whether it's here or there is like a process of investigation. That's not confusion, but when we're confused, like, I don't know what to think about, or I'm confused, and that so we're training our mind out of confusion and into certainty, really. Try teaching and have confusion arise, and you realize that you end up like creating balagan, right? Because the confusion is so strong. Israel has a lot of confusion. Not that everywhere has a lot of confusion. It's not. I'm not judging. I'm just kind of going. I'm remembering that people have talked about balagan and how kind of pervasive it is in Israel, and so I'm kind of tying those two things together. But so confusion as the root of everything. Actually, confusion is another word for ignorance, and the affliction of ignorance manifests as confusion. So we want to investigate that when it's time to investigate it, but to address the root of confusion is different than training the mind in mindfulness because we have a clear object. We just go back to the clear object and not worry about the emotional, afflictive stuff that's coming up, either by cutting it out or not giving it enough attention. If we catch things when they're small enough, all we have to do is sort of in our mind say, no, that's not what I'm going to pay attention to. If our mind gets caught into any of these and then we notice, like if a thought, you experiment with this one. If at one point you catch it right away, how easy or difficult it is, and then at another point, if you don't catch it right away, how easy or difficult it is to go back to your object. What kind of effort does it take to get to the object again? Okay? So that's the investigation that we're doing behind the scenes. When we do this meditation that we're going to do on thoughts, we're not actually directing our attention to thoughts. Okay? We're directing our meditative concentration onto an object that we're going to be very certain about to start with. And we're going to have this introspection be sort of a little bit more important this time. so that we can see how we deal with thoughts when they arise. All right? So that's the first step of this training process. We are going to use our same object of concentration that we used before, the breath. And this time, this time, we're going to just have that intention that I'm going to have sort of an awareness of what I do with the thoughts when they arise and how I handle them. Okay? And for this purpose, maybe we'll do 7 minutes this time. Just a little bit longer, but not too long. So we have...
We stay with the concentration point.
We stay with the same concentration point, the breath, the sensations of the breathing, in order to notice what we do with thoughts when they arise while we're concentrating on the breath. If we don't have any thoughts, maybe we need to make it a longer meditation, but you tell me if you have no thoughts in 7 minutes. Yeah. Okay. I don't think I can go 7 seconds without having something arise. So my training is, how do I deal with it? What kind of effort do I apply? Do I go in and use any labels like, oh, that's remembering something, or that's confusion, or that's judgment, or that's worrying, or that's planning, or that's daydreaming? Okay, so you can use labeling. You can...
Thoughts, if that's all.
Or you can just say thoughts, if that's enough. But you want to be accurate.
That's already analyzing the thought, what you're saying. That you see if it's a planning.
Yeah, so it depends on the person and it depends on the context and how you want to do it. You do it the way you want. Just be clear how you want to do it. Whether you want to use just the word thoughts and you go right back to it, if that's working. If something, however, kind of grabs you, you might need a little bit more. If you catch it right away and you say that's a thought and you're going right back to it, it may take nothing more than just that's a thought. If you start to engage in something, you may need a little bit more kind of direction to your mind. Okay.
I always thought this technique is for trying to understand what is your patterns. It's not the main goal, but also understanding your patterns, and then maybe you can easier, and next time you notice them easier because you know you have the habit of daydreaming in meditation, so you're more aware for the next time when it just begins the daydreaming, you catch it. And if it's a worry, maybe it takes you more time, but because you already know this.
Yeah, you have to be careful, because if you say, "Oh, I'm just recognizing my patterns," I've done this where it's gone on too long, right? So like then it's the next time I sit down and oh, that's my patterns, and then I just go straight into it. You want to sort of set the intention. That's why we did this so clearly, so setting it up, right? You want to set the intention that the goal is really to train the mind to stay on the object. And using labels helps if you have a habitual pattern and you can identify the first appearance of it and you know what's coming. But if you catch it fast enough, you don't need to go into all that detail. So it depends on how far your mind gets attached to the distraction. Are we ready? Okay, so we'll set up our base. set up our base and make it stable. Find that comfortable alertness in the body. If you feel like you need to lie down, you can do this lying down as well. Let's take a brief moment and scan and release. So we're just going to go from the top to the bottom of our body and find the tension, acknowledge it, and let it out with the out breath. And feel how it melts away. So if there's a spot in the neck, by recognizing it, giving it enough attention, encouraging it to let go, moving on to the shoulders, recognizing, acknowledging, encouraging to let go, chest, arms, forearms, hands, recognizing any tension, acknowledging, releasing. Belly, recognizing any tension, acknowledging, releasing on the out-breath, not forcing anything to change, just an attitude of allowing things to change in their own time, encouraging relaxation in the hips, legs, feet. Recognizing any tension, acknowledging, encouraging, relaxing. Right, so then remind yourself of your motivation, your personal desire to train the mind, expanding out into a desire to be of benefit to all sentient beings by attaining highest potential through this training. Turn your attention towards the breath, finding the object that you're going to concentrate your mindfulness activity on. So the mind gets placed on the breath, either at the nostrils or at the diaphragm. Become certain of your familiar object. Set your intention to hold this object for 7 minutes and utilize introspection and vigilance when thoughts arise. Here we go. So before you make major adjustments, start with small ones. Wiggling the toes if the feet have fallen asleep. Starting to move. Remember to smile just a little bit. Give yourself a little feeling of accomplishment. That this effort is not wasted, but is heading in the direction of bringing you to your highest potential, step by step. So, anybody get the 7 minutes with no thoughts? What do you think? Were you aware of thoughts differently this time? We did two things. It wasn't quite fair. We did the body scan ahead. Did you have an echo of that into the... Did anybody have an echo of the body scan into the experience? No? Okay. Good. I did.
Can you go back to the slide where now yeah.
You're gonna get the slides? We're gonna get the...
Did anybody use any of these labels? When you used the labels, how did that go? Was it, where did you how did you use them?
Not these labels, I use the irrelevant.
Irrelevant label, a little bit more judgmental.
I'm not sure, because you said there's actually that thought is compatible to the
Okay,
situation.
not for you? Okay, good.
So I don't know if it's...
It depends. It depends on the context, yeah.
So,
How you were using it, yeah.
can you mention again the remembering what you're using it for?
If you notice that you're remembering something, right? If you've gone into the past,
Yeah, okay.
and planning as if you're going into the future.
Okay.
How did you use your labels? You used these? Did you use it at the beginning, or did you notice it when you had longer involvement? And how did it work?
It was easier to let them go after I
Easy.
labeled them.
Yeah.
But I noticed that sometimes I just find myself at the beginning of the thought, but sometimes I just get into the story and then I realize that I'm thinking.
So that you're starting to refine your own understanding of your own pattern, yeah? What works for your mind, irrelevant, or, oh, that's what's going on, I'm daydreaming now, oh, I'm planning now. Anybody else?
Well, you're actually having a dialogue with yourself during meditation because, for example, I was remembering. I noticed that I was remembering. I remembered what I remembered. And then I told myself, not now. Like, like a mantra, okay, I see, not now. And then I got there. And then again, something arose from the news of this morning. I noticed it. It's not that I stopped it. I saw it arise. And then I said, yeah, not now, and continue.
Making a choice.
I was talking to myself, actually. Which is a distraction by itself.
Yep.
But,
as our minds get more and more refined, it will take less and less effort. Yeah? It won't take a whole dialogue with ourselves to get back. Right? So the refinement of the process changes every day, every moment, right? Sometimes it's more refined and sometimes it's less refined. Maybe you don't always need a dialogue. Maybe sometimes you do need a dialogue. Did anybody use the breath as a, like, I'm breathing out and the thought goes out on the breath, sort of like we did with the body scan? I was going to mention that before we did it, but now I'm mentioning it after we did it. We can use the breath as a way of sort of integrating and pulling out the thoughts and expelling them on the breath. You know? Like,
Sending them out.
so yeah, like, I notice that I'm thinking, breathe out the thought. Back to the breath.
Nice technique.
I couldn't, when I tried to label the thought, it disappeared and I couldn't, what was it about?
I'm not sure if that's I'm not sure if that's success or a lack of mindfulness. Yeah, sounds good. When it disappeared, were you back on your object?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Then you're on your way. Yeah. What I noticed for mine was that I didn't always label, but when my first attempt at, back to the breath kind of instruction, still had an echo of the thought, still had a piece of it remaining, then I'd label what kind of thought, that was a daydream. And by labeling it, even the echo of it or the imprint, the flavor of it went away. So it was like a second round attempt at getting back to the breath. And I felt like it was more at the end of the process than at the beginning of the process of noticing the thought.
What do you mean?
I don't know. That was like my experience was, I'm on the breath. Now I'm not on the breath. I should get back to the breath. But when I would kind of do that in my mind, that motion, I was aware that thought was still present. And then I would label the thought, that's a memory, or that's a worry, or that's a daydream. And then my whole attention was back on the breath.
I knew that there was a thought when I got back to the breath, but I couldn't tell anything about it.
It was gone.
Gone.
I'm not saying you didn't do it right. I was just describing them from my side. You did it right. If it's gone, you don't need to apply anymore. If you've taken care of the thought and it's completely gone, then you're done. You don't need to think and label. In my case, I tried to get back to the breath, but I didn't quite get there because there was still a piece of my mind that had the thought, the story going on. And then I would label it, and then it was gone, and then I could get back to the breath. So I'm not saying to you, you have to label. If it's gone, then you don't want to. This is something we practice also, is not applying the antidote when you don't need it. So if you already took care of the distraction, you don't need to apply any more antidote to the distraction.
wanted to ask about, I noticed that when I'm holding the object, the breath, there's like around it like a bit of stress of not forgetting and like self-criticism, and it's not so light and fun or relaxed in a way that I wanted it to be, because I'm trying to be also vigilant, and not perfect, but vigilant and not forgetful. So it's a mind that is very a bit stressed. So, but it's not. It's like 10%, but I notice it now. So maybe it's also like a thought that can be released, but it's not a thought, a big thought. It's like a thought that is a ring around the whole process. So maybe say to myself, relax, enjoy.
Maybe go back to the beginning when you're setting it up. And in the motivation to say, when you're saying to yourself, I'm going to do this, maybe add in a relaxed manner. Like just a 10% addition. Just enough. And experiment. Because I think that if you say, you try it both ways. Try it in the beginning and then try it without it in the beginning, and see when you notice that, if you relax, do you get into a duller state of mind? Right? Did anybody open and close their eyes to help with dullness? Like if you notice, like almost instantly I was like, oh, it's getting dark in here. Oh, no, I'm getting dull. Open my eyes. It becomes a habitual pattern of adjusting with the eyes, using the breath, the pattern of the breath to expel the thought, doing adjustment of how relaxed am I, how am I, is it just an edge of tension going on? My hips are starting to hurt, so that's pulling my attention out of the object of the breath to the rest of the body. How do I work with that? Because I noticed my mind going back and forth between objects because the pain was pulling me away. Like how do I work with those kinds of things? So.
I wonder, the dog is playing with his bone for half an hour now. This is mindfulness?
Or attachment.
So we are training in mindfulness with a purpose. He's not got that same purpose, most likely. He has some attachment to the pleasure of what he's doing. You watch it.
Determined.
He's very determined. And
Why it's not the purpose? The pleasure, whatever it is. That's a pleasure.
it is, but he's not doing it in order to train his mind.
No, not in order to train him. He's there. We are actually, as you said, for the PhD, he trained himself without the life of the university brought him to be trained in order to be mindful. I'm questioning if this is mindfulness. I don't know what thoughts have in his mind yet, or at all. And what comes first? That's what I'm trying to see. We lost it. We're looking forward to find it again, or it's different. It's an upper level. Or we're first doing the concentration in order to bring us back to this baseline, and for there to grow up?
It's difficult to say that he has one object. His, when we all have minds, and the minds are in a constant stream of experience. Applying mindfulness is a volitional act. Something that we willfully, something we intend, we have some intention to do. And mindfulness is holding us on that object intentionally. If he had a different object appear right now that he preferred, he would leave the bone and go and chase the rabbit, right? Most likely, right? And then he would be totally mindful about chasing the rabbit until he remembered the bone, and then he'd leave the rabbit and get the bone. And so we have it in our survival mechanism as well. Our instinct to concentrate on the experiences and hear the one sound that's the snap of the twig, in the forest that's warning us that there's somebody coming after us. So our minds have that capacity. What we're doing is we're applying it to a more and more refined object in order to be able to analyze the nature of reality. So we're not saying that we don't have the capacity outside of this training. We're not saying that he doesn't have some capacity for mindfulness. But his intention isn't to train the mind in order to get out of cyclic existence. It's not likely that that's the intention of a dog's mind from our perspective, right? I can't say 100% it's not, right? But from the best of the analysis that has been done by myself and by others, that would be the conclusion that we've come to, right? That the animals are not doing it for the same reason. That there's more an instinctual motivation. What we're doing is we're taking a technique that can be used instinctually, and we're applying it to a longer range plan. We're controlling it too, right? We're training it. You have a German Shepherd that's been trained since birth to follow commands, can stay in one place 8 hours without moving, waiting to be released from its stay, right? So dogs can be trained as well. There's a lack. The only lack would be the context and understanding how that's going to be applied to more and more refined subjects, conceptual understandings, which then lead us to this understanding of the very most root cause of all of what we experience. I don't know, I'm not omniscient, I can't tell you what's in his mind, right? So I don't know. Okay, so our I've kind of combined a couple of, you'll have some handouts, and I've kind of combined two of them just now so that we can keep moving and catch up with ourselves, because we're working with how things arise, and it's perfectly fine. But I'm a little bit hopeful to get a little bit more done. So our next sort of focus for our meditation and our training in mindfulness is to develop what's called loving kindness. And this is just to develop those positive, wholesome qualities through applying mindfulness to sort of an attitude, right? So that we have the attitude of increasing our kindness by putting attention on that attitude. We develop that familiarity with applying that attitude in our life. So what comes to mind is that one of the problems with empathy and compassion is applying it, right? That we can train ourselves in recognizing, in identifying, in defining things like empathy and compassion, but sometimes, and they've done studies about this, even after focusing on it, you walk right past somebody who needs something without any compassion. Somebody that really is in trouble, and you just walk right by, not even seeing it, not noticing it, or not having the idea, I could do something. So there's this sort of disconnect that happens between our attitude adjustment and our applying it. So
forgetfulness.
It's a forgetfulness, isn't it? I've just been working on creating this feeling inside myself of loving kindness, and then I walk out and I'm not kind to the person that I walk by. It's like not realizing that it has meaning, not understanding that it's personally to be applied every moment. So mindfulness can be something you take off the cushion, right? And spend your day chewing on a bone. And that's your training. You can train your mind in not forgetting without it being related to a cushion. And our bridge between daily application and sort of thinking about material, physical experiences into the refined experience of the breath and a single object into our concepts, and then maybe into concentrating on the analysis of something, and then into the attitude of something, and then into the application of something. Okay, so it's sort of like this is the progression we are going through today and yesterday. We started with physical things, we became more refined in our physical object, and then we're taking it into looking at introspection itself and analyzing an idea, and then looking at how that wisdom, we can then hold that idea and become familiar, like making it into an attitude or a perspective of our mind. So when you go through life with the perspective of loving kindness, it's not that you're always coming back to that idea in your mind, but you're looking from it. There's no differentiation of coming back to. It's become a part of it. How does that transformation happen? If we took breathing, we always are breathing. We don't have to make it into our perspective because we're already breathing. If we take our body, we don't have to make that our perspective because we started from that perspective. But if we take something like an idea, that might not be our original idea. We might not already have that as our worldview, right? So carefully, only choosing through analysis and discrimination of what's functional and what's dysfunctional, discarding what's irrelevant or dysfunctional, and going towards what's positive and wholesome and what we want to incorporate into our view, like loving kindness. There are some students I had in the past in the public school, their parents were not happy with me teaching their child to be compassionate. They had made the decision that compassion, empathy, kindness were not values in their family because their goal was something different. It was money or power or something. But compassion and kindness were not their goal. They made a conscious choice about that, and they got upset with me if I were teaching their child compassion. Who do you think you are, teaching my child that? Like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought everybody wanted more compassion in their life, but you don't. How do I be respectful to that? So you have choices, what you consider wholesome and positive and furthering where you want to go, right? Whether loving kindness is part of that or not is part of your choice. So this is jumping into that, past that choice and assuming that you've made that choice, that loving compassion, kindness is something that you want to develop in your mind. Okay? But that's not necessarily true for everyone. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's been actually something I've analyzed and kind of come back to quite a bit. How can someone not think loving kindness is a good thing to develop in their child? How can that be? What worldview am I in if I'm saying that? And really believe it from my heart. Equating loving kindness to weakness in a way. And instead of a powerful attitude that produces even more interconnected so on. If you're okay with putting some energy into developing loving kindness, the way that you might do this in a meditation with mindfulness at the center of that meditation is to sort of encourage these thoughts of, may I live in safety, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. So trying those on. So we're hearing, then we're going to listen. We're listening and hearing those words, and then we're going to try them on a little bit, and before we make them the object of becoming familiar with them, meditating on them, and experimenting with how we go into taking a conclusion of an analysis that's been made. I've kind of skipped that part a little bit, right? Do you need me to go into how mindfulness applies to analysis, or are you comfortable skipping that part?
How mindfulness applies to
Yeah, the actual
Yeah,
analysis.
but I think we've been doing it
We've been
spontaneously, no?
we've been doing it in our
Yeah,
conversations.
exactly.
And we've been doing it all the whole time. Perfect. That's what I was thinking, actually. We have been doing this. So maybe we can kind of not do it as a meditation, but you can do it as a meditation as well. You can go ahead and set up your mindful intention to look at a topic in the Lamrim, death and impermanence. I'm going to analyze how my relationship, my understanding of death is, find out what the details of that idea are, discriminate between the word, what the word impermanence really means. Oh, it means moment by moment change. It doesn't mean not existing a long, long, long time. It means every moment it's changing. Oh, like these kinds of ideas can be analyzed, and your mind, it's like you're in the PhD program and you're really, so all of us have gone to some level of schooling and we've done a job, and that kind of analysis is something we've all trained ourselves in some way, whether it's learning on a job or learning in school. We've analyzed, we've made sure that we've got it right, we've torn it apart to look at the smaller pieces of a lot of different ideas. Then we come to a conclusion. Loving kindness is something I want to make more prominent in my worldview, from my point of view, from my familiarity with loving kindness. I want to strengthen that. How do I do that? I take these sort of examples of loving kindness towards myself, and I hold those mentally without judgment, watching how I'm interacting with that thought. So, not letting a story develop into other thoughts, but holding that mindfulness on, may I live in safety. May I be happy. May I be healthy. Automatically I'll go into, oh, I had this dream this morning and it was about this and it wasn't healthy and this. Oh, wait a minute. Bring the mind back to just the thought, just the attitude, just that idea. May I be happy. May I live with ease. Should we do an experiment with it? Is 7 minutes going to feel too long? You want to try it? It's a challenge. This is a challenge because it's mental on mental, right? It's like bone on bone is easier because then you have the sensation. But mental on mental, like distinguishing as, is my mind on the object? So, is it a familiar enough object that you're going to choose? Not really. I'm not familiar with these. I have to read them, right? So do you want to pick one of these four? Of these four, pick one, because you can be familiar maybe with one. I'll leave it up to you which one you feel comfortable with, which one you want to spend some time with.
It's actually loving kindness toward ourselves, first of all.
Yep, towards ourself. Exactly. And we start with ourself, and then we change the I. May you be happy. May all beings be happy. May all others, right? Okay, so we're just starting with ourself. We're just starting with one of these. So let's go ahead and start our base. Make sure you've chosen. I tend to be like, I don't know, I like that one. I like that one. Pick one. Set the stable base. Notice any tensions and release them as best you can as you put your nervous system into a comfortable state. Supportive of concentration. Place your hands in a posture that will encourage you. This will be important, particularly with this mental activity here. Tongue to the roof of the mouth, eyes slightly open, chin tilted down slightly. Say to yourself the phrase, may I. Set your intention to hold your mind on that phrase for the next 7 minutes. In a relaxed way, non-judgmental way, using introspection to notice when your mind diverts from this attitude and phrase. And bring your mind back to this activity of being mindful of the object, may I. So slowly bringing your mind to dedicate, realizing that what we have done is spend the morning thinking about mindfulness, practicing mindfulness, investigating, analyzing, learning techniques about how to practice mindfulness within the context of using that to increase our ability to concentrate and therefore to investigate and analyze more refined objects such as philosophical and wholesome positive qualities that we want to develop in our own experience. But also in relation to wisdom, so the compassion side, the wisdom side, both of these are needed to become that fully capable being that is benefiting others without any separation between their experience and the benefit that is given. So we're dedicating all of our efforts with a sense of happy, rejoicing in our own efforts, rejoicing in the efforts in this room, rejoicing in everybody outside of this room who's engaged in mindfulness or compassion or wisdom. Ordinary beings, extraordinary beings, rejoicing in all of that. Tying it all together into this nice package and sending it on to this final goal of enlightenment without any interference. Clear path ahead. And with all of that dedication, we can enjoy our lunch and each other's company and relax, let go of any of the tension of attempting to be mindful.